everyone, Highly OK podcast. Thanks for tuning in again. If you watched our previous podcast, we spoke a bit of Kurdish, which we will implement into our next couple of videos every now and again. So hopefully the sound is a lot better this time. So we apologize again for that. But this time we've got two brilliant guests. One is a familiar face, and another is familiar as well. You might have seen her on one of the Sully Forum interviews, but we were so intrigued as to what she wanted to say at Sully Forum. We didn't have enough time, so I'm really glad you came to join us today. Goshan, thank you very much.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.
Thank you for coming. And Aya, you all know Aya, she's back.
Back.
Yeah, thank you for coming back, Aya. She's gonna help us out on this one. They've teamed up to destroy me today. So what we're gonna talk about is Goshan. If you don't know her, if you're not from AUIS and you probably don't know her, then she's from the gender department at AUIS CGDS. They're doing really well. She's a lecturer at AUIS right now, and she's a brilliant teacher from everyone that I've heard that she's teaches. So I'm really glad.
I like that math style. Thank you. That's great.
Yeah, I haven't taken your class yet, but I definitely will.
I hope so.
So thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
And tell me a bit more about, because a lot of people have questions about as to, because CGDS is doing they're unparalleled to the other departments at AUIS in terms of the grants that they're getting right now. I want to dwell into a bit about why that is that their grants they're doing well, apart from the fact that obviously the gender department is really competent themselves.
Mm-hmm.
But I want to let me know, because it's the second grant of $1 million that you've received, even though it was from LSE, so it was £800,000, right?
Yes.
Tell me, what is the gender department looking to achieve? What have they achieved? And for anyone who has any misconceptions, tell us a bit more about the gender department.
Okay, that's lots of questions in one. So, what is the gender department trying to achieve? Well, it's part of the name CGDS, Centre for Gender and Development Studies. Yeah. We're trying to encourage a culture of gender awareness and gender knowledge, but also implement it into. We're using intersectionality with it, so we're trying to understand also things like diversity, disability, religion. We're looking at all of the different factors that play into privilege and sort of power struggles in the community, but looking at gender as the overarching theme. What are we trying to achieve? Frankly, we're trying to make the world better for people through working on these issues, because the greater tolerance you develop within people, the better the society is going to be, and development will become much more easier, I feel.
Yeah.
As to your question about how, I forgot your question.
So the first question, which we can get into later anyway, but as to what you're doing at the moment, there's a lot of translation of books, right?
Yes.
So with the translation of books, is there a certain type of books and authors that you're targeting?
Okay.
As to what you translate. So
let me separate into two, because we have two major grants that we've received right now. The first one is the EU grant that we made a big hubbub about last year, and that grant basically consisted of a implementation project. So it's lots and lots of different things. The main thing we're doing with that grant is we're trying to encourage gender education in both higher education, but also trying to work on sort of regular education levels too.
Right.
We're doing that by monitoring the current books that we have from year 1 to year 9 schools. Okay. We're trying to see if there's any sort of gender disparities or gender inequality in them, and we're trying to give them the government a report on how to fix that. What you're mentioning is actually for the higher education, because you may be aware that Dr. Man's going to be angry at me for not knowing the date, but a little while back, the Ministry of Higher Education made a decree that every single university had to have at least a gender studies component in their field of study.
Wait, who done that?
The Minister of Higher Education.
That's progress.
Iraq or Kurdistan?
In Kurdistan, I believe. But don't quote me, I don't know if that's completely correct.
I wouldn't be surprised if that was the case.
I know. No, well, that's what that's what we've based our whole grant on. So, it's great that we have this decree that we have to have gender studies everywhere in every university, but if we don't have the resources for it, how are we going to get people learning about gender? So this is where the CGDS came in, and we said we're going to focus on the areas where we have the greatest social impact. So that's media. We're looking at regular education, so from primary to secondary school. We're looking also at law and social work as well.
So tell me, a lot of people look at the fact that the gender department's opened up. a lot of people are skeptical at first as to, the market value behind a gender degree.
Yeah.
But also, like now, they're less skeptical, but there are still skeptics out there.
Of course.
Because, they realize, oh, wow, that brought in $2 million. Like, even if you disagree with what they're saying, it's like it's creating jobs. It's good for AUIS if you're an AUIS student. And it's just good for the economy itself. That's a lot of money, and that comes from what a team of how many people? Like six.
Currently, we're bigger. No, we're about. I'd say about. Hold on, let me count it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I want to say core team, but we have a whole number of people that are sort of like the supporting team outside. So they don't have a formal role.
Right.
But they do a great job with us anyway. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, look. 8 people, $2 million. Quite a good job.
Well, yeah.
But yeah, tell me.
I don't want to boast, but yeah, you should keep saying these things.
But tell me more about why you think a gender degree can help people. We all understand. I think there's not many people who disagree with the fact that gender in education isn't necessary or important.
Right.
But a gender degree is something that you're lobbying for, right?
Well, we're working to. We have a gender minor. We're aspirational to have at least another gender major or possibly a master's in gender in the future. Why is it important? I hope so. I hope so. Why would we want to do that? Well, it comes down to the culture of the society. So currently we have a culture where we still like sort of vocational degrees. So we want you to get a degree in medicine so you can be a doctor. We want you to get a degree in engineering so you can be an engineer. There's we don't like those sort of, I don't want to say it, but sort of more wishy-washy type degrees where you don't really know where you'd go afterwards, right?
Yeah.
It gives people a bit of anxiety about where you're going to work afterwards. Are you going to have a career or anything? Why is gender important? Well, as a degree, because like I said, particularly with the way that we're dealing with it, it's very intersectional, so it kind of includes all aspects. I mean, if you look at the classes we're offering at the moment, we have from my class, which is Gender and Health, which is very much to do with public health and social health, and then looking at gender through that. And then you have things like gender and religion, you have gender and society, things like social justice classes. All of these things are related to the wider community as a whole, which gives you a lot of information as an individual, helps you grow intellectually. But at the same time, they give you all of the soft skills that you would require to do it well in any job, frankly.
Right, so you're saying also at the same time that because there's a lack of knowledge in that department means that there's a lot of space for people to become professors and, teach in that department itself.
Yeah, not just teaching though, because we want to go away from just keeping gender as an academic field, right? So, for example, if you're working in a marketing agency, right, it would do very well to have some gender knowledge so that when you're creating your advertisements and you're influencing society, you're not going to be exactly these social norms or these societal norms about what gender is and what men and women should be like in society. I mean, we've all seen these adverts. I don't know if you watch Kurdish TV or anything, but some of them are really sort of laughable at how old school they are in their mentalities of what women and men should be like in society. I would argue that a marketing company manager would want to have someone who's got the acumen or the understanding to make sure that their produce is going to be socially acceptable to the wider community, not just the local community, right? If they're looking to expand. That's only one very simple example. You could be a physician, a doctor, and if you don't have gender awareness, you're not helping your patients because you're going to be exacerbating their sense of I've forgotten the word I wanted to use, but making patients feel like they're not being treated the way they should be because you don't understand those sort of gender dynamics that you are playing into, right? This is our intention. So we're trying to make people generally aware of the gender issues that we have in society, but simultaneously, by giving people a formal education in it, you're actually giving people a chance to say, actually, this is a really important field to look into, and it's a field that's going to be valuable to any field. It's one of those degrees that can get you into anywhere if you wanted to in the future. Yeah. Apart from the sort of very technical careers that you might have. Right. Does that make sense?
No, it does. It does. I mean, there's a lot to that. There's a lot of, reasons as to why the gender awareness is important, but also you make a good case for it being an important major and a valuable major as well.
I think it should be a class in each department, like even in our university, because we have those lecturers, let's say, who've graduated with a bachelor's degree, who are teaching us, but sometimes especially for me, like as a girl, they make comments that don't match up with their level of education. Like we were in lab once, and we had the cosmetics class, and one of the teachers was like, the girls don't need this class. They know everything about makeup.
What?
Yeah, and I just sat there and I was like, that is not true.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
is it because of things? I wanted to get back to this with you as well, and with you. I want to ask you, like, you yourself, you'd consider yourself feminist. I agree, you as well. But can you tell me, as you grew up in London, right?
Yes.
And you grew up here. When was the trigger for both of you? I'll let you start on this one.
Go on.
The trigger, no pun intended.
I'm not even exaggerating.
Okay,
I think it was 6 or 5. I'm not exaggerating because I grew up with my brother and my cousins, so I grew up with boys, and I never saw things that this is for boys and this is for girls. And I would have, as I kept growing, people would tell me, no, this is for boys, this is for girls. I never understood and I never accepted it. And then until I came to an age of realizing that it doesn't have to be that way, I just hated everything. And I hated the culture. But once I started reading for my own and researching, I realized, this is a thing.
This is a thing. I'm not the only one who thinks like this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So.
What about you?
I'd say about the same age, frankly. I think I was always just had this streak in me that was very reluctant to accept that girls are different to boys. But also, I don't know if you grew up with the Spice Girls either, right? So the Spice Girls, and I know that's going to sound so trivial, but honestly, the whole girl power thing that they were fighting for. And I remember being in the playground when I was in year 2. And it was the common rhetoric among the girls say, girls can do anything that the boys can do. And boys felt like they had to sort of accept that because the Spice Girls were saying it, and everyone loved the Spice Girls.
Everyone loved the Spice Girls.
Yeah, but
good reference, yeah.
Indeed. I was obsessed with them at that age, completely. But for me, I mean, again, I grew up with boys. I had a younger brother and I had an older sister, but she was 14 years older, so she was a whole different generation.
Wow, okay.
But my younger brother and I had a bunch of cousins as well who were all boys who could move to London with us, and so my reference was always I was the tomboy. I grew up acting like one of the guys, and then it became apparent when I was a bit older, like about 7 or 8, 9, where they'd ask me to get the water and not the boys, or they'd ask me to go and clean the dishes, and I'd be like,
I don't know about that.
They're hiding us, and they're not. And then I remember one time my aunt, bless her, and she keeps saying it to me even now. She was like, Goshan, can you do the dishes? And I was like, why can't you ask your son to do it or my brother to do it? And she's like, but they're boys, they don't know how to. She's like, well, I learned, they can learn too. And so she didn't know how to respond to that. And so she refused to ask me again after that point, because she was like, I don't want to be shamed into submission by this little child who thinks she's smarter than me. But my point is, I think I always had this sort of reluctance to accept those sort of gender norms that we had in society and among our community. And it wasn't just within the Kurds, it was very exacerbated. It was very apparent in the non-Kurdish community that I was part of too. Girls do this and boys do that, and girls wear pink and boys wear blue, and girls do dance routines and cheerlead while the boys play football. And I was like, no, I don't want to be one of you guys. I want to be playing on the pitch too.
You good at football?
I was.
Not really?
Anymore. Yeah, no.
Oh yeah, maybe
not anymore. I've stopped playing.
Yeah.
Because I have issues with falling over often.
I once broke my arm playing football.
Did you?
Because
oh my goodness.
they would always make me the goalkeeper because I was really bad.
Oh.
And you just wanted to
I was actually a good goalkeeper. I was
so bad.
I was good at it. No, I was good.
The thing is, I've noticed it starts really, really early.
Yeah.
Because with my nieces, I noticed that they're 6 and 5. And the thing is, nobody is forcing them now, because my sisters refuse to be like, oh, this is for girls, this is for boys. But I noticed that they don't like watching cartoons that are for boys. And I give them a lot of trouble for it. I'm like, why do you not like watching Batman? And they're like, oh, it's for boys, I don't like it. And then I ask them why, and they're like, there are no girls in it.
Oh, right.
So, and then I told them that Justice League had Wonder Woman in it, and they're like, but it's one girl and 5 guys. And I'm like, okay, maybe representation does matter.
It's fair point.
Okay, but why didn't they watch Star Wars?
They didn't like it. I forced them to watch
You
Star
grew up
Wars.
watching Star Wars. Were you a Star Wars fan?
Never. I'm sorry, I just was not interested in Star Wars at all.
And the earlier Star Wars had a much better feminist message than the prequels.
Yeah.
Because with Princess Leia, you even notice like the first movie is so different. It was made in the 80s, I think. And
so you think we were doing well, and then we went backwards
exactly.
again? Oh,
I think the 90s and the 2000s we went backwards.
I agree.
Right?
Mm.
Okay.
From Virginia Woolf to I don't know what came around that time.
Paris Hilton.
Yeah, right.
Yes.
That might be true, actually. Yeah, that's a good interpretation.
There you go.
But yeah, you grew up as a feminist, but were you like a wild not social justice, an activist? Were you an activist?
I wouldn't call myself an activist.
But you had those beliefs, and you like.
But I wanted to finish that statement by saying I think everyone's an activist if you even inwardly disagree with something that you see is happening. So I think not being complicit to something is in and of itself an act of activism, right? So not accepting it. So because the most dangerous thing is mentality, right? It's not necessarily the actions, because actions can be changed, but mentalities can't be.
Yeah,
right?
it can go to the voting booth.
It takes, indeed, and it takes a lot longer to change culture and mentalities among people. So, I mean, even if I went to go and wash the dishes, but if I did it reluctantly, I think that was still an act of, activism, because it's kind of me not accepting that role. I'll accept it for now, but I still do not agree that this is how it should be. And that's a really trivial case of I just don't like washing dishes, but that's another case of the matter. But like I think you don't have to be the loudest voice to be an activist. You can be somebody who imparts change on society by changing yourself.
Of course.
And that sounds really American, like, let's change the world for better. But like, I mean that in the most sincere way. I feel like if you, within yourself, change your perceptions of what things are, you are in and of yourself actually having a very positive impact on society, because it does have a rippling effect. Just having a conversation can change somebody else's mind.
I think also like changing the people closest to you, like your mothers, your aunts, your sisters. I think that's really important. If everyone did that, there'd be a bigger change.
It's much more effective as well.
Indeed.
Like if you go on Facebook and Twitter and you have a debate, like chances are no one's really like listening to you. They're much less likely to be persuaded. And if you do it with the loved ones around you, and you have that personal connection with them, it's true. Like someone might be very passionate about what they believe to the people around them, but not publicly, not through social media or any of that stuff, but still have as much of an effect or even more than someone who is doing it explicitly. That's what I would agree with,
completely. That doesn't mean to say that the social media stuff isn't valuable, because, I mean, the more visual those things are, the more people have those questions in their mind, right? I always say, you don't need to change someone's mind, you just need to plant a seed of doubt in their mind. And then when they see more things about it, then that will start growing that seed into maybe a bit more of an issue. And then they'll start thinking about it more deeply. Because it's almost impossible to change someone's mind from just one discussion, for example. Even from multiple discussions, or from one person.
About that.
I mean, particularly with this particular region of the world, we're quite stubborn in general. We tend to have very strong beliefs. We tend to have we're very set in our ways, and it takes a lot more than just saying you're wrong and I'm right to change someone's mind about something, particularly things like gender or issues of social justice.
Did you find yourself as you were growing up overcompensating to be taken as seriously as the boys? Because that's what I've experienced.
I wanted to be the smartest in the class.
Right?
I always wanted, and I remember always dressing very down. I was like, I'm not going to make an effort. I'll dress just as the boys do so that I can be taken as seriously. But what I find was, even at that age, I understood how valuable it was to be considered masculine as opposed to feminine. So I played into that role, that sort of stereotype of, okay, I'm going to act like a boy so that I can get the privileges of boys,
I went through the same thing.
It's something that most girls who feel this way do. So I completely shunned away dolls and dresses, and I was wearing, trainers or sneakers and, shorts and t-shirts that were baggy, and that was my aesthetic until I went into secondary school. So, yeah, I think I agree with that completely.
Yeah, it's kind of hard because what I've noticed is when a girl is bad at math, let's say. This is a saying everywhere on the internet nowadays. When a girl is bad at math, all women are bad at math. But when a man is bad at math, he's bad at math. So it was always this pressure to excel in school and in everything, even in driving.
Yeah.
I had to be an excellent driver, or all women are bad drivers.
Yes.
So
And then when you were an excellent driver, or when you were an excellent math
you're an
person,
exception.
you're special.
Yeah, it's just
But everybody
you.
else is
You're not
still
like
not
other
very-
girls.
You're not the same as them, though. And when I would often hear this when I'm here, when I talk about these things with some of my circles of friends, and they're like, yeah, but Goshan, you're different. And I'm like, no, I'm not. I'm just the same as anybody else. It's a matter of circumstance that I'm able to verbalize this to you, and maybe somebody else isn't.
Do you think it was your desire to be, rebellious, or your actual passion for wearing those type of clothes?
She's not
football?
wearing them now.
I know.
Means
I know.
I think it was part of my identity. That's how that's what I felt comfortable in. It wasn't necessarily an active decision, but in hindsight, I realized that maybe that's what I was doing. At the time, I just wanted to wear something that was comfortable to play games in and not have to worry about getting it ripped or getting it dirty.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say that I was ever, whoever knows me personally wouldn't say that I'm ever a rebel. I'm very much I like to accommodate people, and I'm like, make you feel comfortable. But I'm I would call myself an undercover rebel. So I change things.
Rebel.
No, honestly, I change your mind without you realizing that I'm changing your mind. Just by playing into what you want, but having very minuscule changes.
it's a very feminine.
It's a very
rebellion.
feminine rebellion. And it's something that women have learned to do, unfortunately, because sometimes that's the only way you can get some influence.
Otherwise, you're bossy. If you don't do those things in a subtle way, if you don't change people's mind in a subtle way, you're considered bossy. And
I was called bossy often too, don't worry.
I've been called condescending.
Well, when you say sweetie,
I can't say sweetie.
It's a nice sentiment. I say darling.
But
all the time.
I do say it in a condescending way.
but you as well. She's nodding. For God's sake, we know your intentions, okay? But yeah, at the same time, I understand that you'll want to, your sentiment against being told a certain way of doing something will just get you mad. Like sometimes I'm around people who believe who say something in a certain way, or they all believe the same thing, and it just makes you makes you want to say whatever it is you believe even more. And that's in my opinion the problem with tyranny. Like anyone who wants to impose their ideas over you.
Imposition is never a nice thing.
It's never is, and that's why you'd rather do it in a passive way.
I don't want to be the person saying you have to listen to what I want to say, because I don't like people doing that to me, and it's a sort of I really do believe you treat people how you want to be treated.
But back to what you guys are saying about a feminine way of persuasion. Is it because like when girls speak to each other, like you don't want to really be rude. You want to act nice. Even
Goshan,
if
you might want to bring
your
it
mic.
Sorry. No, sorry.
Yeah, sure.
Do you think it's because of the interactions between each other? Yeah, as in like
No.
girls?
No. I think we've been brought up to be passive. It's how it's kind of like so. I don't know if you've taken any classes of gender ever.
I have. I've taken 2.
Okay, so you know the difference between sex and gender, right?
Yeah.
So sex is your biological, and gender is your
social.
Yes, your socially constructed idea of what gender is. From the age of less than 1, okay, we make our children aspire to be timid, quiet girls, but loud and rambunctious boys, right? We encourage boys to be rowdy and have a bit of a laugh and be a centre of attention, whereas we tell our girls to be quiet and demure and aql, right? And so we've been told that we don't have the same level of platform or the right the same way that boys do to be able to just voice our opinions, okay?
Yeah.
And as you said quite rightly, when we do, we're labelled as bossy or
unattractive.
bitchy or
It is-
unattractive, or it's considered a negative trait, right?
Yeah.
So as ever in history, you have to, whenever you are the sort of, without making the women seem like the victims of society, because, I guess in some cases they are, but when you are the downtrodden, you have to find alternative ways to get to levels of some sort of authority or power, and you do those with whatever means you have.
Yeah, as you said, it can be actually effective.
Indeed.
Doing the passive way of persuasion.
Mm-hmm.
But back to what you were saying about how, what was you saying? But with feminism and with the way that you grew up, do you think that you were more inclined to think like this when you came? Not that you were already thinking like this, but when you came here,
Mm-hmm.
when did you come here? 4 or 5 years ago?
6 years now.
6 years now.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think your, tendency and your passion for what we're talking about right now
Mm-hmm.
grew, or is the same as it is now, or less? Because obviously,
Fascinating.
because you can see that it's a lot worse here than it is there.
I wouldn't necessarily say it's a
Really?
lot worse. It's just a different type of worse. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So
He doesn't agree.
I don't know if that makes any sense grammatically, but
No, it does. I mean,
I
it makes
agree
sense.
with you, but he doesn't.
Yeah,
So,
I would
like-
disagree about the Western part, but go on.
so in the West we have this image of freedom for women, right?
Mm-hmm.
But there are certain fundamental things there that still exist that are equally as bad as we have here. Maybe we have a lot more restriction on freedom of mobility, movement here, but we have just as much domestic violence in Britain as we do here. We may have just as much other forms of gender-based violence, so for example, catcalling, harassment, these sorts of things. The only difference is that in somewhere like Britain or Europe or America, there are policies and laws that you can utilise to protect you from them, right?
Laws.
We have them here as well, especially in the Kurdistan region. We have actually got a domestic violence law that's specific for that. But again, as with everything in this country, we have implementation issues, so we don't implement it as well as we do,
And
right?
the culture as well. Women
Yeah, they
will
can't
not speak
speak
about
out.
it because
Indeed,
they're told
because
to
it's
accept
shameful,
it.
right?
Yes.
But also, I'd say this culture also has some level of protectivity too. So, for example, because of this concept of honour, you may not see necessarily as much visible sexual abuse
Yes.
on the streets, for example. You may not see a guy grabbing somebody's ass. They may try to, but it's not quite as common as you'd see in somewhere in Europe, right?
Yeah.
I'm not saying that this is a far better situation. I'm just saying you shouldn't consider this because this is a underdeveloped region. We don't have any laws and we don't have as much development as any other place in the world, that we have a very, very bad situation with gender. We do. I'm not saying we don't. But don't say that it's completely
Exclusive to
yeah,
here.
exclusive to here. It's not. It's
Yeah.
it's worldwide. It exists among every population. I mean, for God's sake, not to mention Donald Trump, but he was one of the biggest examples of how men, even in positions of complete power, with great education, with great developmental environments, still have this mentality that they can sort of take liberties with women. And
I think yeah, you're right on in the sense that it's not exclusive to here, but I'd say the culture aspect of things does have repercussions in policy. So
yes.
with like somewhere like here, if we were to compare, let's say, sexual abuse, even people in the United Kingdom or US, a lot of women would be reluctant to speak up about sexual abuse because of but the thing is, I think it's like that could be a lot worse here in terms of just men's inability to comprehend that women can have a voice here too. Women can have a voice too.
Yeah.
But I just think so. For example, if Donald Trump had said what he said, grab women by the where, if a leader here said that, there would have been a lot less backlash.
That's not true. That's not true. Kurds are very PC. Especially when it comes to politicians. Have you ever seen a politician say anything inappropriate on TV or
that's
anywhere?
because they are politically correct. But if they were to be politically incorrect, it would
would never-
not have that sort of backlash.
I must disagree with you.
I mean, look,
no other politician in the world has ever said what Donald Trump has said and gotten away with it.
yeah, and I think that's not only because of. I don't think it's because of sexism, in my opinion. I think it's because of the people's absolute hatred for political correctness itself.
I think it's an American thing.
Wow, we're going into so many different dimensions. And it's like,
Yeah, I mean, we can disagree on that all day, but people being absolutely pure, politicians being pure about what they say and scripted and reading off a teleprompter isn't as fancied as it was before.
But you don't go to the extreme of joking about sexual abuse.
I mean, look, it was.
It's not either or.
No, I don't think anyone thought what he said was a nice thing.
But they still voted for him.
But they still voted.
They still voted for him, and he still got away with it without any repercussion really from it.
No backlash.
Whereas
he's still president. That's not enough backlash. People saying, "Oh, he shouldn't have said that." Yeah, we know he shouldn't have said that, but where are the consequences?
I mean, the consequences are that the people who, didn't. He lost the popular vote.
He's still in position of power, though.
He's in a position of power.
I think
and that's frankly, unfortunately, what matters most in this world now. Who has the sort of finger on the red button, essentially, right?
Yeah.
And he's still that person. He still influences their policy. I mean, they're trying to reel back their advances in terms of like abortion policy in America as well, which is atrocious. That's one of those things where, in my opinion, of course, I'm seeing faces here.
Yeah, because we've had
it's giving me
so many arguments.
I've seen Aya like, yes, she agrees with me, and he's giving me the face of like, no, I don't agree. That's fine. No, so we can agree and disagree on that later. But my point is, he still is. With that mentality, his mentality translates into policy, and his mentality translates into the way that country is run. And frankly, whether we like it or not, America is also a big influencer on the rest of the world. Right?
Oh, of course, in terms of media
it's going to
and
trickle
all that.
down, and it's going to have an
how did it
impact
trickle
on
down?
our society.
Even European countries are now joining the conservative wave of anti-immigrant, PC culture wave.
I mean, look. You have to be really specific. I know you're saying anti-immigration.
I think it was Austria who had
Poland,
a really conservative.
Even Poland, even Holland has
But he didn't win. That's the difference. There was a really conservative candidate.
Yeah. I mean, you're right in the sense that it's trickling down into other countries.
I think it's just a part of time.
Absolutely.
We have
I'll give you an example of how it's trickling down.
Okay,
just this week, the UN had a little meeting. Oh, I'm so bad with my names today. I can't remember.
Just say woman, man.
Woman. No, I don't remember the name of the person, but they actually voted to remove a clause about sexual violations. I'm complete annihilating. I'm sorry, people who are listening. I know
it's alright.
This is wrong.
We'll probably put a link.
But put the link in later on. Basically, they from just sort of brain farting right now. Excuse me.
It happens.
Yeah. No, so basically the general gist of what they did was they removed the concept of sexual violations or sexual violence from a very important UN clause, right? Okay. This is not really giving you much information right now, I know, and I'm aware of that, and I'm trying to...
But when you watched it, you were thinking,
I know,
yes,
I will promise that I will send you the link. You can
No,
check
it's fine. I mean, I definitely understand that it does trickle down. I mean,
it does.
But I don't know if we're really going to go back on feminism. Are we going to stop women from voting? Are we going to say now that sexual abuse is right?
Can I speak on this one,
Sure.
please? Because that's one of those misconceptions that feminism is just about letting women vote and letting them work and letting them do this.
I hate the term letting.
Letting is the word there, right?
I just went to the logical extreme.
But let me explain why feminism is important. Because even to this day, where even in Britain, right, there are complete disparities in the experiences of women and men in everything. And I'll speak about health because that's my area of expertise, right? It is very, very likely that a woman will die of birthing, like giving birth to a child. That is a situation that men don't face ever, right?
Okay.
Childbirth and pregnancy in itself is incredibly dangerous for women's health. We trivialize it because it's considered a natural thing, and it's like, women do it. Our mothers gave birth in the fields and they came back to work again. These are all the rhetorics of like, oh, that's why women should be stronger and they should be able to deal with it. But actually, it's a very, very huge strain on their lives. Men don't face that. So in and of itself, biologically, we have a disparity in our health experiences, right?
Yeah.
It is not fair to have that disparity and then to punish women for having a natural issue with themselves, right? So for that reason, you need to work towards making that level playing field so that when we can now work towards equality, right?
Yeah.
Does that make sense at all?
He doesn't believe it. He believes in something called equality of
opportunity.
Yeah,
but
you
can't have equal opportunity if you don't have an equal starting position. That's the point.
Exactly.
You have to work
with
equity
biology.
first.
Okay. So you're telling me a biological example, right?
Yeah.
Something that whether we like it or not, we can't give birth, right? Men, we speaking for men.
Okay.
But so how are we supposed to fix that? How are we supposed to give that disparity?
You lessen the gap by giving women the needs that they require to give them an equal level. This is what equities. Needs? So, for example, providing them with adequate health services, right? Giving a bit more light onto family planning services, for example. Giving women freedom to choose whether they want to have contraceptions or plan their how many children they want and how far apart they want. Giving women the fundamental things they need to be able to function at the same capacity as men do, regardless of those what we call biological traits, right? And it's the same thing with men. So men have other difficulties too.
Yeah.
So men are more likely to die on the spot. They don't have chronic diseases.
Oh, they have men are more likely to have blood pressure,
heart attacks,
high blood
strokes
pressure earlier.
So it would make sense in terms of the health department to focus some of your efforts into increasing awareness among men specifically about those particular things. So my point is, it doesn't make sense to have one size fits all for anything, right? I'll give you a football analogy, right? It's kind of like you want to do something nice for a football team, right? And you give them all a pair of football trainers. If you do it equally, you're giving them all the same trainer, which is the same size. Okay, but some of them are size 9, some of them are size 7. It doesn't help the one if you give them all a size 8, it's not going to help any of those people.
Yeah.
Equitably, you're giving them the shoe that fits them. Does that make sense? So some of them might be bigger, some of them might be smaller.
I get what you mean.
And so you're bridging that gap that's between them, and therefore when you have that equal level playing field, then you can have the equality of opportunity thing that you're mentioning.
No, absolutely. But at the same time, you're giving me a biological example. There are biological examples. You know, you're the one who teaches it. I mean, the biological example, I don't think is that. Of course, it's a problem, but it's not what all feminism stands for. It's the social. So, for example, they'll say...
In fact, social is more prominent.
It's more prominent, but I want you to give me an example of where, they start off with a disadvantage over a man in a social system.
I'll give you...
Because a biological one... Okay, sure. A biological one is, it's... there may be problems. Is there that many that we can't actually achieve in the, with a bit more research and a bit more technological advances? Like if we were to figure out a better way to give, for a healthier way for women to give birth, that could come from the private sector. That doesn't really need to come from government, pumping money into, trying to bridge this gap.
That's not true.
Oh no, why is that not true? Because
given women better healthcare comes with governmental, let's say, free healthcare.
Why does it have to come?
Because some women can't afford some of that healthcare.
So my question to you is: do you think healthcare or good health is a right or is it privilege?
He thinks it's a privilege.
I think it's a commodity. Yeah.
You think good health is a commodity?
Yes.
That's where we would disagree quite.
Oh yeah, I'm sure. I knew this before we sat down.
Because to me, health is a human right. I think that you should have the right to be healthy, living healthy, and actually it's part of the Constitution of human rights as well. Not explicitly mentioned, but it mentions that you have the right to live a healthy life and pursue happiness and so on. Yeah. So if you live on my principle, then what I was saying is completely spot on. The government has a responsibility to provide adequate healthcare and provide an environment where people are not disadvantaged in their health.
Absolutely. And I believe human rights don't come from where, you're not interfering with anyone else's right. Now, with health, you are doing that. So if someone needs a doctor, you're using the rights of the doctor. You're forcing the doctor to be with this patient, to help this patient. This is why I don't think I draw the distinction of the right to free speech to the right to healthcare. But it's because doctors...
that's a very... You're simplifying the situation. A doctor is not forced. They're employed. They're being paid.
Of course.
It's a whole system.
So would you argue that I'm being forced to teach students in my class?
But you're being paid.
But so is a doctor.
Through private healthcare. And imagine everything...
What about my professors? It's a public university.
So they could get paid a lot more for what they get if they were through private healthcare.
Not true.
You're mixing up... So their payment, you said that if a physician is made to do better health services for a pregnant woman, for example, you're forcing them to do that, right? And therefore you're impinging on their right. Okay, that's what you said.
Yeah, but that's not my only issue, is it?
No, I know. But just to tackle that point exactly, if I give you my example, I'm in the private sector because I'm part of AUIS, you know that. This is not necessarily true, but if I were in a classroom that I didn't want to teach, I would then be expected to do that teaching anyway because it's part of my contract. So would that then mean that I'm also being sort of impeached or forced into that particular position?
No, because you can leave your job.
So can a public sector doctor?
Yes, but he can, but then, or he or she can, but the thing is they have no other option.
There is.
Well,
in a system like ours, you can have a private clinic, you can teach in university, you can be at the hospital.
Then the wages are way less likely to be at where they should be on the economic scale. So, for example, if you have public and private, the chances of having the private sector being way too expensive goes up like drastically because you have a free alternative, and then private healthcare needs to then compete with free, which is virtually impossible.
But what
Who wants to go to private if it's not high quality?
What are you prioritizing? People's general health or
both.
Profits for
Both.
private?
You can do that. I genuinely think you can do both.
But I think if in a situation that you're giving in which you should pick one of them first, which one would you? Okay, if you're saying public healthcare is bad for the well-being of private healthcare, which one should we abolish?
Not the well-being.
Okay,
but like the wages and the prices.
Which one should you sacrifice?
I think you should it's not about sacrificing one or the other. It's about having.
Then what is the
having nothing
problem?
Interfere with the wage, with the price of medicine,
and,
with the
and
price.
What is the? How do you accomplish that?
You accomplish that by abolishing a public sector.
Exactly.
He said private first. We'll take that.
Yeah.
Look.
No. So if I can interject on this,
sure,
because I'm quite passionate about this actually, because when you have a public sector, what you're doing by having that is you're saying that on the point of contact with the doctor, you don't need to pay anything, right?
On the point of contact with the
So
doctor.
when you are sick and you go to hospital, so you're going to be denied treatment if you don't have the money on you there and then.
Oh, and that's the point of a public one.
Yes.
Okay. Okay.
Even in some private where you have insurance systems, that's the purpose behind it, okay?
Yes.
The only issue I have with what you said is if you have a free clinic, then that's going to make the private sector more expensive. Is that right?
Yes.
I would argue the alternative, because if you have a free clinic that's giving you good quality healthcare, we're looking at the ideal, then the private clinic has to compete with that, and so they're going to have lower prices with a little bit more quality.
Right.
They're not going to put higher prices. No. Second of all, if you have a healthcare system that is private only, and you're looking at a community like ours, where we're still considered a developing society, right? We don't have everyone being, getting like 6-digit wages at all. What you're doing is you're improving the economy maybe by improving the private sector, but you're doing that by treading on those who are most vulnerable because they're the ones who can't afford the private sector treatment. And with regards to health in general, again, I'm going to come back to the fact that health is a right. You need to be able to provide a foundational level of quality in terms of healthcare for everyone at a reasonable price, whether it's education as well or health. Those two things are two things that you really shouldn't have to privatize to be able to get to your society, because that is what determines development. If you want to develop in your community, you improve health, because if people are sick, they're not going to be able to work, they're not going to be able to input into the economy. You improve education because you enable people to actually become active participants in your society. If you don't have those two things in a public system, that means a vast majority of the population are not going to get access to it, and if they don't get access to it, you're going to be sort of slowing down development as a result. And we see that in so many developing countries right now, Nepal being one of them.
Nepal?
Mm-hmm.
Developing? Oh, right.
They haven't reached the same level of development as they should have done because they have a heavily privatized health and health and education system. Even primary education is for money there. So the vast majority of people there are considered illiterate, and the majority of them have issues in accessing healthcare when they need it. So the majority of them do not have the capability to live fulfilling lives because they don't have access to the basic needs that they have.
I mean, I'd have to look into the example of Nepal a bit
Yeah.
further, but you'd be surprised. I mean, I don't know if you'd be surprised. I'm sure you're from London as well. You know, the NHS has really bad waiting times. It doesn't,
Yeah.
like, I have a cousin of mine, my uncle's wife actually, she had a back problem which wasn't like, I don't know what you call it, like emergency?
It wasn't urgent.
It wasn't urgent, yeah, like she could live. Right, but she had to walk on a limp, like with a limp.
Yeah.
She's been waiting for about 16 years now because it costs so much money.
Wow.
This is, I don't want to bring anecdotal arguments because anecdotal arguments don't work. Your one worked a lot better because you're talking about a whole country and how they've privatized their market. I'm sure there's things that go into it. I haven't really looked at Nepal, but there are countries like Switzerland who fully privatize their healthcare, but the universality is still there as well. And as to your point of, you know, whether the private sector will have to lower their prices to compete with the public sector, you're right. There will be private clinics that will want to compete with the public sector. The only issue is the public sector being, let's bring here up, the public sector being the public healthcare being as bad as it is so the only way you'd be able to compete with them is if your prices are so low that the quality is bad as well. Now,
so I did say if the public sector has got a good quality base. I'm not saying that we have to have a bad quality in the
right. So you're saying I mean I can agree with that, but at the same time, I can't agree with the fact that it will run as efficiently and as effectively as it would through private means of production.
Okay, I think your point is really interesting because having a public sector or having a public health system doesn't necessarily mean that you have the government paying for everything, right?
Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah.
But it just means that the government
mixed economy.
You can have a mixed economy. You can have a system where you have all of your hospitals are privatized, but the government provides insurance to the patients, and therefore their access to that healthcare is still free at the point of contact. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So sort of like Obamacare.
Yes, similar to that, right?
Yeah.
There are positives and negatives to all of these actual models, right? I would still very much prefer the NHS model. It just needs some reorganisation, because what the NHS model does is, doesn't matter who you are, where you're from, what particular background you are, if you go to an NHS hospital, you'll get exactly the same treatment as anybody else. It may require some more efficiency because the waiting hours are too long and it's ridiculous to have to wait for 16 years for an operation. But it still provides the most equal opportunity. Come back to your point before, it provides everyone with the most equal opportunity to healthcare as anything else. What any other private sector does is it basically prioritizes those who have money and those who have the means to pay for things over those who don't. And being someone who likes to work in development, who likes to bridge that gap, I just cannot agree that that's a good model. It's good for the economy, it provides money, it provides jobs, yes it does. And I'm not saying the private sector in health, right? I'm not saying we should completely eliminate them, but I'm saying that we should, as a government specifically, primarily focus our efforts on rebuilding our public sector, because by doing that you're helping a vast more greater amount of people in society than by not doing that, if that makes sense.
You gave the example of someone waiting to get an operation, 16
years?
Yes.
The alternative is a private, let's say, clinic. Someone that cannot afford it could never do the operation.
Well, the thing is you're bringing up an example where you don't know how the private economy would mean not having any public, healthcare would mean that there's a lot less money being taken from someone to put in. Our model is different. So Kurdistan model we can't compare to in terms of income tax, because we pay through oil, right? But in an economy where the means of production comes from the income tax, the government's means of production comes from income tax, is that people will pay a lot less in taxes and a lot more in charity. Now, look, I'm not saying that America is the most the ideal economy or whatever it is.
It's far from it.
It's far from it,
especially
absolutely.
when it comes to healthcare.
That's why I cite which came from Obamacare. But let's
that was an attempt at improving it.
Indeed.
And it made it the premiums raised by 300% by the end of his term. But getting back to my point is
that doesn't
we're
mean
in an economy where people don't get taxed. People tend to be more charitable, depending.
Okay, so what you're doing is you're basing it on the temperament of individuals, and that's a dangerous thing to do.
And it goes against his beliefs, actually, because he does not believe that people are innately good, right?
I think people in positions of power will become corrupt, yes.
No, but do you believe that people are innately good?
I don't think people are innately good or bad. I think that in power they get corrupt.
But we've had this conversation.
Yeah, I know, but I say people suck, but because when they get into positions of power, they suck.
But this is an imaginary situation in which everyone is happy and good and will donate money.
Absolutely. But we're having a podcast, so let's try and move on. Let's have an icebreaker. Oh, you knew what I was going to go to.
Of course.
She knows you well, it seems. Okay, good.
She knows me too well, man. She's trying to put me in hold. One time you said that people suck.
I know. Every thought that goes through your head.
I'm glad.
Yeah, no, she does. She keeps me on my toes. And I will say, by the way, even though we didn't have this conversation publicly, that you did beat me in the debate about principles of leadership. So I'll tell you that. Like,
Thank
I
you.
look back at it later. I didn't. We're debating whether a principled leader is. So a religious leader is more likely to be principled than
a non-religious leader.
Person.
And what did you argue for? I'm intrigued.
She argued two things. She argued that. Can I speak for you?
Yeah, of course.
Okay. So she argued that that's not true. That if someone's religious, then they're not more likely to be principled because of the fact that this is where she got me is that someone can repent in Christianity. And secondly, religion. She said that she doesn't believe a principled leader is a good one, right?
Yes, because they don't change their mind.
And I agree with both of them now, even though I didn't before.
Okay,
so
great.
I'll admit defeat.
They're both very strong arguments. Well done, my dear.
So.
Are we playing a game?
Yeah. So we need to explain the game.
Oh, yeah, explain.
You do it.
Okay, so this game is called 30 Seconds. There are a bunch of words that I can't say to them. I will try to describe them. Mm-hmm. And whoever guesses the word first, right?
Okay.
I guess is the winner.
Best of how many?
Best 5. There are 5, so if you know 3.
No, if you get 5. Oh, wait. You have as many as you want, but the best.
No, and then like each card has 5 words.
You don't need to do cards. Just the one who gets, let's say, 5 right first.
Okay.
You down for that?
All right.
And if there's something interesting that comes up on there, you can talk about it as well.
Okay, cool.
All right, here we go. Goshan Karadaghi.
Okay, so first man created.
Adam.
Oh.
He has an advantage because
I have played these before, but I don't know all of the words.
Okay, all right. There's one for you.
She's getting ready. She's like, you know what? I just start off well.
British football club with a slogan: "You'll never walk alone."
Liverpool.
Yeah.
What?
You'll never.
I don't know football stuff.
How come she
Not
knows
fair.
this?
I don't know. She's your friend.
No.
I don't tell her.
I used to watch football back in the day when I was trying to fit in with the boys.
Not fair.
I got 2.
These are 2 practices. They don't count.
A superhero that's afraid of some rock.
Superman.
Yeah, but the female version.
Superwoman.
Woman. No, that's not fair.
No. It's a different form of woman.
Wonder Woman.
No. You said superwoman.
Superman, I said. No?
And then he said superwoman.
Super lady.
It's changed?
Super female.
Another word for that.
Supergirl.
Yeah.
That counts for me.
That face, oh man.
That counts for me.
Okay, you can have that one. It's
That's
2-1.
Okay.
See what we do for feminism.
Hey, I refuse to have a point. You can take that back. Thank you.
Oh no, you should never do that.
I don't
You
need
should
it.
never do that.
I will beat you in my own terms.
Italian dictator.
Berlusconi.
She said it first. Did she?
No,
But she said the wrong thing.
Mussolini, did she say?
No,
I said the completely wrong word.
Okay,
I don't know what
fair
I'm
enough,
saying.
okay.
It's fine. I even pulled my hair in
3-0. I won't take the other one, but you don't get that point, so I'm 3-0 now.
That's not cool.
Okay, I'm trying to find something.
Don't skew it. It's fine. Let's keep
Yeah,
it
she's
nice
trying.
and
Oh,
lead singer of the Beatles.
John Lennon.
Here you go.
he beat his wife, by the way, if anyone didn't
Imagine
know.
all the people.
Okay, so one of the 7 wonders of the world, it's located in Egypt.
The pyramids of Giza.
Okay, is it 3-3 or?
No, it's 2-3.
2-3. Okay.
I'm letting her have that one.
So the day before today.
Tuesday. What?
The day before today.
Day before
Sunday.
Today.
What do you-
Yesterday.
Yeah, there you go. 3-3.
The day before today. Oh.
The guy who sings Uptown Funk.
Bruno Mars.
There you go.
Right, so 4-3. This is getting tense.
You don't look tense.
It's my poker face.
tense.
I want something difficult because this
Yeah,
is
go
like
on.
this is the last one.
Don't try. I know you're trying to.
Okay. What's its name? So Peter Pan, the villain in Peter Pan.
Hook.
There is a word before that.
Captain Hook.
Yeah.
4-4.
Yeah. Now this.
Should we go for 7? Should we go for 7?
Go on then.
All right, let's go for 7.
Okay. So I'll just.
If I win this, then we end the game.
Okay. I don't know if you guys. It's one of the first video games. It's when blocks come down.
Tetris.
There you go.
4-5.
I hope you're not letting me win.
No, I didn't know. I
He
didn't know that one.
genuinely doesn't know. Otherwise.
I did know that, but I just didn't come to my mind.
Yeah, I know. I'm saying you wouldn't let her
Of
win.
course not. She beat me in the debate. She ain't beating me in this.
Okay.
Where Donald Trump lives.
White House.
Oh,
What house?
She's so much quicker than
What
you.
house?
The
The White House.
You
She
should say where the
won.
president lives. I was going to say Trump Tower.
So that's 6 now I have.
Oh
Yeah,
my
you have
god.
6 or
There's
7?
one more.
One more.
One more and I win.
Somebody once told me the world.
Shush.
Shrek.
Yeah.
No, man.
That one.
I am a champion at 30 seconds.
And
How
this
do you feel?
concludes that women are smarter than men.
How do you feel, my dear? I'm sorry.
Is this a post-match interview? Oh man. All right, you have that one. How'd you? I
he
knew that was from
can't
somewhere.
get back into the podcast now.
Yeah, I know. It's
He's just
quite
gonna
a-
have. We
How
can
long-
continue the conversation now. It's fine. That's no
How
worries.
long
You can
has it
compose
You
yourself.
don't need men, huh?
Of course not.
No.
It's been an hour.
Yeah.
I've had fun. Have you had
Yeah.
fun?
Indeed.
I think we had a constructive debate and constructive talks about gender. So
Yes.
we'll end it there because I'm not feeling very well about myself.
It's okay. You'll be fine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll
You're a
see
big,
you.
strong man. You can handle it.
That fragile masculinity.
Hey, why are you stereotyping me? For God's sake, maybe I'm just a.
It's the
snowflake.
British sarcasm, darling. You should know that. Come on.
She's darling me as well.
Yeah, sweetie, what's wrong?
Just kidding.
This is nightmare.
All right, everyone, like and subscribe.
Oh.
Highly Okay Podcast. Thank you so much for coming, Goshan.
Thank you for having me.
We had a
Enjoyed
brilliant
myself.
time.
Likewise.
And yeah, just like and subscribe. Okay? Aya, thanks for coming again.
And,
And then we'll see you